Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart Starr. All my cheese heads go pack go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will.
All right. Good evening and welcome into Lombardi's Legends podcast. I am Wags. Joining me as always is Dane. And unfortunately, we're coming to you here on Monday night after a Packers loss to the Falcons in week 2, 25-24. Packers looked good through 3 quarters and just unfortunately were not able to hang on against the Falcons in Atlanta. Dane, we knew this would not necessarily be an easy game, but the way that this was set up, we were sure hoping, I think, to be able to pull this one off, especially considering the fact that we went into the fourth quarter with a 24-12 lead. So shorthanded or not, with all the injuries that we had, I think that's probably what's the most gut-wrenching when you think about this game.
Yeah. Hey, good morning or good evening. Happy Monday night. We're recording on Monday evening. Yeah, it's disappointing. It was a disappointing loss. And frankly, injuries are not an excuse. They're never an excuse. But there's a lot of positives from this as well. I'm certainly not Wags going to be somebody that the sky is falling after this loss. I think there's a ton of positives to look at. And, I think that approach I want to have going into this one is just, we can talk about the highs and the lows a little bit, right? Because I think that is what happened. Obviously, the outcome wasn't what we needed it to be, and the Packers as a team need to be better than they were. But if you told me after 2 weeks that Jordan Love would 6 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions, and I'm fairly confident, if I'm not mistaken, I saw today that Jordan also is leading the league in, I think it's pass percentage, I think is what I saw, something along those lines. So like Jordan's been very efficient. He's been very good. And I want to talk more about that. But yeah, it's disappointing loss. Anytime the Packers lose, even going into this year where we knew there'd be growing pains, I think everybody in the outset said, oh man, they're going to have some rough games, but then, we're 1 game in, 2 games in, the first loss and the sky's falling for some Packer fans. I'm not there yet. But yeah, I'm disappointed after this game because I honestly thought going into the fourth quarter, this Packer team was going to pull it out, and it didn't happen. What's your head at right now, Wags? You've had 24 hours or so to process what happened. I'm kind of curious what your read is so far.
Yeah, I think first of all, you go into the game without Aaron Jones, without Christian Watson for the second straight week, and then surprisingly without David Bakhtiari, which I know has been a lightning rod point as well for some Packer fans. And then you lose Elton Jenkins during the game. You've got Rashawn Gary that's out there, but clearly on a pitch count in terms of the number of snaps he's getting. And you lose by 1 to Atlanta on the road. I think and you say, well, Jordan Love played really well for the most part for most of the game. I think in the fourth quarter, which we can get to, there was some opportunities missed there where you'd like to see some growth for sure. But then you'd be thinking, wow, that was a gritty performance. The team just stepped up. They battled and were right in a game where on paper, not that Atlanta seems like a great team this year, but that's got the recipe for the type of game that you're not going to be in at the end of the game. So that said, on the flip side, I think what's disappointing is we did see a lot of some of the flaws in the team and the coaching that we've seen over the years. So we'll get to that too as we get it further into the discussion. But yeah, Dan, just to start with Jordan Love, another really solid performance. I know statistically it only 150 yards passing, but vertically picked up over 80 yards in downfield passes because of those pass interference penalties, and both of those I thought were nice throws. The first one for sure, he had Wicks. That would have been a touchdown. I maybe he gets caught from behind as he's adjusting or catching the ball. But those are the types of throws that can definitely really open up this offense over the course of a 17-game season. So that was really encouraging. I thought he had some nice strikes, some nice decisions, particularly as he got in rhythm in the second quarter. Started a little bit slow again for the second week in a row, but really got a rhythm in the second and third quarter. And just unfortunately, I don't think the offense was out there enough in the fourth quarter. They had 2 straight 3-and-outs before that last possession. And so it's hard to get a rhythm in that situation. I think part of that's on Jordan. They had in the first possession of the fourth quarter, first play call, nice play action. He's got Dobbs, I believe, kind of on a post corner route. He's open, not the easiest throw, but you'd like to see him complete that. So I don't know if he and Dobbs were not quite on the same page. Looks like Dobbs kind of flattened out the route, and Jordan kind of thought he was going to break further up the sideline. And so that was really the main reason for that throw not being completed. That's the type of play that if the Packers complete that to start the series, you can play this ifs, ands, or buts game. They might go down, respond, go back up by minimally 7-8 points, as Atlanta had just scored to open the fourth quarter. And that could be a different ball game down at the end of regulation. So it's something that Jordan needs to improve on. Obviously, he's responsible for the execution out there on the field. I thought Coach LaFleur got a little too conservative in that second series of the fourth quarter when they were up by 2 after holding Atlanta to the field goal. We've seen that over the years with Coach LaFleur. I think you in particular probably pointed out, and I have too, but that's something that's I think fair criticism of Coach LaFleur. There's been times where you had MVP Aaron Rodgers, and it seemed like maybe quarterback and coach weren't on the same page in some of those fourth quarter drives. Now it's, Jordan Love, and it's got a whole bunch of different skill players as well, and it manifests itself. Now it's only one game, but that's something that I was hoping was in our rear view mirror. Unfortunately, it seems like this is going to be another opportunity for coaching staff and players on the offensive side of the ball to learn how to instill that killer instinct and execute better in the fourth quarter and play a four-quarter game instead of getting really conservative and not attacking maybe as much or executing as well in some of those fourth quarter situations.
What is that about? I'm very curious your take, because that's been a criticism I think of this Packers team, frankly, since Coach LaFleur's taken over. And this isn't going to be me piling on Matt LaFleur, but there is a lack of urgency at times, especially early in the season. This is a team that can sometimes start slow. This is a team we've talked about as nauseum, that when they kind of get punched, they don't have that counter punch back that you would like to see out of that, a special football team at times. And, yet again, it felt like in the fourth quarter when the chips were all out there and the game was on the line. And this isn't just the offense, by the way. This was a full team effort. I feel like, unfortunately, they kind of shrunk when the lights got the brightest, and that guts me to say that because I love this team. But I don't know if it's an individual effort. I don't know if it's a coaching thing. What I thought yesterday, and I made note of this, was through 3 quarters and into the fourth quarter, I went, man, if they lose this football game, it's not because they don't have the talent. So what does that mean exactly? And I get that experience and some winning is an earned and a learned thing in this league to a certain extent. But at the same time, they were the better football team. They're a better football team than Atlanta. And for some reason, yet again, they kind of got punched, didn't have that counter punch, and they kind of just folded. And I'm curious, do you have a thought of why this is becoming and is a trend at this point? Because it's not becoming a trend. It truly is a trend. This team has a hard time closing out games. It doesn't have that killer instinct, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's why I started with coaching, because listen, players have good performances, bad performances. I think there's plenty of blame to go around. We're not looking to scapegoat anyone. I mean, that seems to be what some irrational fans like to do. But yeah, the players needed to execute better on both sides of the ball in the fourth quarter, period. point blank. There's lots to look at on tape. And we'll get to the defensive side a little later, but that's the thing that I'm looking at, Dane, when you're looking at the trends and you've got different players, you've got a different quarterback, you've got different skill players. I mean, obviously I know Aaron Jones has been there the whole time. He wasn't out there yesterday, but that's what's frustrating to me is some of these situational opportunities. And I haven't gotten the exact splits, but I did go and look back and Packers offense by quarter, points scored. They're very good in the second quarter. They're generally been solid in the third quarter. It's interesting. They've been good some years in the first quarter. We had a couple years that we weren't quite as good. But usually Coach LaFleur has got a really good game plan, and I think the Packers come out and execute it. Unfortunately, I think the trend that we see is that he hasn't necessarily, I don't know if he's not as good at the adjustments or the other coaching that they're and the opponents in certain matchups are doing a better job of adjusting to what the Packers are doing as you get later in the game. But that game flow seems to knock them off. And one of the things that was interesting and where I mentioned the Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback coach dynamic is some of that can be an identity crisis where, you're fighting against each other of what you're trying to do from a game flow standpoint. Are you going to be a power run team and finish teams off that way? Or are you going to, continue to be attacking through the pass? And in past years with Rodgers, it did seem like at times Coach LaFleur would shuffle between the two, which you could say is, well, that's good coaching in theory, depending on who you're playing against and how the game flow is. That being said, it does seem like there's a disturbing trend where the Packers have been unable to put teams away. So it hasn't been a positive the way, and this is a little anecdotal. So I mean, but it's not just us seeing this, right, Dane? It's clearly something that's been a concern or an issue. And so this is just one game. I'll be interested to see how both the team and the coaching staff responds. We've got different opponents, so we're not going to be playing the Atlanta Falcons, but we came into this game thinking that we had some advantages and that we would be able to run the ball more effectively. Atlanta was able to aggressively shoot the gaps as we talked about in our preview. And unfortunately, we just didn't get the run game going. And I think that's what really affected the rhythm of this offense the later that it got in the game. That second possession of the fourth quarter, which was just so critical. You can say that was play calling. AJ Dillon just got to pick up the first down on 3rd and 1. He stumbles over his feet a little bit. There wasn't the biggest hole there, but you've got to power back. There was enough of a crease. Stay on your feet, keep your center of gravity, and push the pile forward. Get minimum your 2 yards, move the sticks, and then that can maybe start to see where things can go from there. So it's a mix, and I don't want to kill anyone here, Dane, but I'm curious if you have any other thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's frustrating. It was frustrating to watch AJ Dillon run the ball yesterday. Early in the game, I thought that his pad level was extremely high, something they talked a lot about in the offseason. He's too big to only break one tackle in the game. And by my count and going back and looking at stuff, I only see one broken tackle. That's not enough with a guy his size. And I agree. I will be the first to say, and I'll join you in the chorus of, the offensive line had some challenges yesterday. And certainly when you're down your two top, offensive linemen on the left side there, that is a problem. But that being said, all of that said, there's 2 yards in front of you. And you're right. That was the time when we just needed AJ Dillon to go pick up 2 yards. He's a big back. You're supposed to get those 2 yards there. I think I hate comparing guys, but I think Aaron Jones gets those 2 yards. I think Patrick Taylor gets those 2 yards. He gets what's in front of him. So, I was very, very frustrated by AJ. I thought he had some really nice series, by the way, in this game. I don't think it was all bad. I saw him run very strong on a couple of runs as well. But so far through 2 games, I think his long is 8 yards. He's under 3 and he's right around 3.5 yards a carry, which just that's average. And I think he can be better than that. We saw it a couple years ago how strong of a runner he can be for this team. So I was very disappointed in that, and also I was fairly disappointed in Coach LaFleur's lack of ability to give Emmanuel Wilson a little bit more run too. I thought that the first run was a really poor decision to kind of that pitch to the outside. That's just something, especially when we're talking about, Bakhtiari's not going. You've got a young left tackle in there, and you're trying to run to the left side against a defense that's fast enough to get to the corner. Like that made no sense. Second run, Wags, I thought Emmanuel Wilson had a really nice run. And to my recollection, I don't know if they went back to him again. I would have liked to have seen the young back get a couple more touches. And I thought it was also telling that on that final drive, Patrick Taylor was the running back in. Now we know his pass protection is really strong, but still, just, all of these things, I know it's scattered what I'm saying, but it's just telling what the running back situation was yesterday. That, I just don't think A.J. Dillon had a very strong performance, and the offensive line didn't do him any favors. And when you combine those two things, it makes for a really tough fourth quarter when you're just not able to get the yards needed to put a team away.
Yeah, Emmanuel Wilson did have 3 carries for
Okay, so I
5
missed one
yards. So
there. Yeah.
I do wonder. You mentioned that first carry that he had. He didn't probably make the best decision by going more side to side than just trying to get upfield and at least get to the line of scrimmage. Sometimes it's tough when you don't have an opening and you got a young guy coming in. He's trying to make a play, right? So I don't blame him necessarily. That's just a learning opportunity for him. But I agree, Dane. We talked about this was not a good matchup. This defense was not a good matchup for an A.J. Dillon type runner coming into this game. We needed someone that has more of that cutback ability. So I think Emmanuel Wilson may have been a better matchup. He didn't get enough carries to show that. He didn't get an opportunity to get any type of rhythm. So that's something that maybe the coaches will be going back and looking at. And hopefully we've got Aaron Jones coming back healthy this week. But if there's ever a situation like that, it is a matchup driven thing. Maybe there's matchups A.J. Dillon is better suited to be that lead guy. But I think Emmanuel Wilson certainly showed enough in the preseason. You're carrying him on this 53-man roster. Use him. If it's not a good matchup for your other guy, use this young kid and see what he can do. Maybe it just takes one. If he finds that crease, finds that cutback lane, and all of a sudden you can get a little bit of momentum going in the run game, that could have really changed some things up as well. So,
well, right.
Dane,
And let me just add one more thing. I mean, don't say, and nobody can say, oh, he doesn't have the experience. I mean, Dontavius Wicks is out there. Wicks is out there balling, right? Jaden Reed, who I wanted to ask you about in a second, but this is already an exceedingly youthful position group, the skill position group with wide receiver and tight end. What's one more when the matchup seems to favor somebody like Emmanuel Wilson a little bit more? But Wags, I wanted to mention Jaden Reed. This is your guy. You predicted Jaden Reed was going to be extremely good for the Packers. As soon as they drafted him, you said he's the man. 2 touchdowns later, looked extremely explosive. He's not shrinking with the opportunity in front of him. In fact, he's seizing the opportunity. I don't care. Christian Watson comes back. Jaden Reed's still going to be a massive target, I think, for Jordan Love. So what do you make of Jaden Reed? Let's look at some of the positives. Holy smokes. Dude looks like a real player for this team.
Yeah, it's exciting. And he is a dynamic threat from anywhere he lines up on the field. They were able to use him in that red zone for that first touchdown with that motion. And that's been something that I think's been missing from this offense in the last couple of seasons. So I'm just thrilled to see for him and for us as Packer fans to see Jaden Reed prove that he belongs not only out there with the Packers, but in this league as someone that I think could become a real threat down the road. I'm not as high as I am on him. I'm not going to sit here and say he's an all-pro. I mean, he's still got a ways to go, but I'm definitely, as you know, very, very high on Jayden Reed. He was the guy that I was most excited to talk about after the draft. There's nothing that's going to slow me down to continue that. But Dean, how about Dontavian Wicks? A really nice touchdown for him as well. Just a strike from Love, but a really nice route. You mentioned Wicks was the guy that they sent deep on that first vertical route. It didn't have to be him. So clearly they're really high on this young player as well. So exciting to see both of those guys contribute in the pass game. And Luke Musgrave in the first half, I really would have liked to see. He didn't get any targets in the second half. I think there would have been some opportunities we talk about in those fourth quarter situations where you just need to get some yards and get some rhythm and stay on the field, move the sticks a little bit. That tight end can be such a dynamic release valve. He was doing some really good things in the second quarter. I really don't know why they went away from him down the stretch of this game as well, because frankly, I think he could have picked up some much needed yardage to give this offense some rhythm as well.
Yeah, and yet again, for second week in a row, Musgrave gets the lion's share at tight end. He plays a significant number of snaps compared to everybody else across the board. DeGuara, again, plays kind of more of that fullback role, less of that inline tight end role, and then Sims and Tucker Kraft. I think Kraft only got a couple snaps as an inline tight end for the Packers. So Musgrave really is getting that lion's share at the tight end. But Dontavius Wicks, man, what a cool story. Really fun. We're very, very excited and proud of him. I mean, 5th round pick, playing at such a high level for the Packers early on. I thought in week 1, didn't get as many looks, but in week 2 they let it rip. He's got the speed. We said in camp, dude's got the speed. He showed off the speed. He makes the catch. He makes the play. I love that little shimmy off of that safety that was on him to for him to take it to the house on that touchdown play. It's so funny and it's so interesting, Wags, because this is a position group all offseason. The national pundits talk about the Packer wide receiver group. Was this the thinnest receiver group in the league and all this stuff? And all of a sudden I start to look around and I go, you get Christian Watson back, you get Romeo Doubs, his hamstring, he played 80% of the snaps yesterday. So he's getting better and, healthier and healthier. And then you look at Jayden Reed with his 2 touchdown performance in only his second game. And then you look at Dontavius Wicks, you look at Malik Heath, right? You start to go down this list and you go, they're youthful, but it doesn't mean they're not really damn talented. So I'm so excited about it. And that's why I'm a little upbeat today, going into this, because we have so many guys that I think can be real impact players in the National Football League. And then I don't, before we go to the defense, I don't want to shortchange Jordan Love, because there was some stuff that I really noticed from him. The 2 takeaways I really had, and I'm curious if anything stuck out to you. The first one was actually on that 4th down play to end the game. Even though Samori Toure wasn't able to bring the ball down, what a throw, pressure in his face, 4th down, Jordan Love threw an absolute missile at Toure and gave him an opportunity to make the play. So that's number 1. That is a very hard play to that throw to make. Number 2, I kept saying it out loud to myself yesterday. Jordan Love just sees the field really well. We see so many young quarterbacks or guys that are less experienced in starting in the National Football League that look hurried. They look like, they dial in on one wide receiver and that's it, or one read. Jordan Love is very comfortable at pulling the ball back down, looking, scanning, and finding the right guy. Did he miss a couple guys yesterday? Sure. That's to be expected. Hell, we've seen Aaron Rodgers miss guys, even in his MVP season at certain times. But I was just really impressed by his poise yet again to be able to scan the field and more often than not, find the open man in pressure situations. So just really exciting with that. And again, without some of your top receivers out there with the left side of your offensive line, without your running back 1, for him to just stand in the pocket and make some of those throws and find some guys and fit it in some tight windows, I thought that was really, really cool to see. And I'm excited because I really think there's still more chance for him to grow. So how couldn't we be excited about Jordan Love right now?
Yeah, and I'm not going to pour water on your point because I agree with pretty much just everything you said. The money situation was having the ball back with 57 seconds left, a chance to go down the field and kick a field goal and win the game. So that's where I would expect him to learn and grow. What you really have to do in that situation and is you got to get that first completion. They had plenty of time to go over the middle. It doesn't matter if you pick up 5 yards, you pick up 2 yards, you pick up 12 yards. If you get any yards, now the defense has to run and move, and everything is the wheels start spinning a little bit. You put the defense on its heels, you just get that rhythm, get that first completion, maybe it's 5 yards over the middle, and then you can go quick line up. Defense is scrambling a little bit to line up, not a lot of time to get a play called in. You could do a little out route to the sideline, pick up 6 more yards, first down, move the sticks. Now you've got that forward momentum. Maybe 20 seconds comes off the clock, but so you don't have all day. But that's really the biggest thing that I was hoping we would have been at least move the sticks 1-2 times, get down there. Maybe they don't end up getting into field goal range, and you kind of have a desperation heave at the end. But that was the only thing that was a little bit disappointing in terms of his situational awareness, and it wasn't for lack of effort. I mean, obviously he was trying to get the completions and just didn't connect, but I think you got to take the easy pass in on first down in that 2-minute offense scenario, get the defense on its heels, moving, scrambling, and that's where you're going to get the advantage as an offense in those situations. So that would be my only critique, I think, of his ability in some of those situations. He wasn't as good, or the Packers offense in general wasn't as good on third down as they were in week 1 against the Bears, or 3 for 9 on third down. So that's something that we know kind of fluctuates sometimes week to week, and I would expect them to bounce back and hopefully have a better performance in the weeks ahead. But Dane,
last thing about Jordan Love, I want to hear your take on him taking responsibility for that sneak. What's your take on that? Because I for one was actually pretty impressed with how he handled the post game interview, and just kind of curious your take.
Yeah, so I was a little bit surprised that they apparently actually were going to try to do the quarterback sneak in that situation. First of all, but yeah, post game press conference, Jordan Love said that he didn't get the right call at the line of scrimmage, and therefore he was taking responsibility for the botched false start, and nobody else had the appropriate call for the snap to be ready to go. So that's whether that's true or not. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I just think that shows tremendous leadership on Jordan's part. And honestly, that accountability is a breath of fresh air. I don't need to get into all the reasons why, but I will just say that that's real leadership right there. So not only the poise in most of those situations, and yeah, he was poised even in that last series. It wasn't like he was rattled or making really bad throws. I thought his one really bad throw was the first possession of the third quarter when he should have had his first interception of the season on third down. He threw it right, I think, to Terrell on kind of an out route. But yeah, no, to that point, Dane, I'm glad you brought that up because it's not just about what you do on the field. It's about, leading these guys in the locker room, and they all see that. And that's why they're rallying around him. So I expect positive things from him in the weeks ahead. Dane, should we move over then to the defensive side of the ball? I think there might be some more grievances. I think both players and coaching in terms of how we assess this one. Certainly, you can say that the Packers were good situationally on the defensive side of the ball in the first half. I would argue that the Falcons may have shot themselves in the foot more than the Packers were good situationally. But you can, argue till you're blue in the face on that one, and neither side is going to be right or wrong. But I'm just going to turn it over to you. What stood out the most, other than the same old story of the Packers not being able to slow down the run game of the opposing team when that's really all they want to do coming into the game?
Yeah. I mean, couldn't stop the run. absolutely was the story of the day. I don't care how good Bijan Robinson is. And by the way, that dude's super good. I said yesterday, he reminds me of Adrian Peterson. I mean, like, and that I don't just say that. Dude looks like different on the field. So Falcons got a guy in him, but he also was benefited from some pretty nice running lanes, unfortunately, that I just didn't think that the Packers defensive line in particular was going to allow to happen. I didn't think the Falcons matched up well against this Packers defensive line. And so I was very frustrated by that. Very frustrated by a couple key players in this Packers secondary. Jair Alexander and Darnell Savage are the two guys that come to mind for different reasons. And I just, they were not, they weren't aggressive. I thought that they should have added an eighth guy, bring an eighth guy down in the box and really try to stop the run and make Ritter try to beat them through the air. I don't think they did that. And unfortunately, even when they didn't do that, Ritter was able to make some very, very big time throws in important moments on our number one cornerback, Jair Alexander. I thought Jair Alexander had the worst game I've ever seen him play as a Packer. And I'm not trying to be, extra when I say that. I sincerely mean that. He got torched a number of times and in key moments. So I'm very frustrated by some individual players on the defense, and I'm frankly pretty frustrated in Joe Barry yet again. If I'm being real with you, I just it didn't seem like and I want to hear your take on this, but what a vanilla, boring game plan. I don't know what he was trying to do to stop the Falcons. It was kind of like defensive coordinator by numbers yet again. They weren't trying to take away the best players. They were kind of just like rolling guys out there. It's like what I would do in Madden, but it's not what I think an NFL defensive coordinator should do, particularly when there's this many talented guys that we think we have on defense. So I turn it to you. I mean, what went wrong? Is this a Joe Barry situation yet again? Because I think it's fair to say, and in my perspective, it's not Joe Barry. It's not the players. It's a little bit of both. There's some individual guys I'm very frustrated with, but also Joe Barry's scheme was pretty damn bad yet again.
Well, I hate to say this, but I don't think there's anything different week to week about Joe Barry's scheme. You said it, vanilla. It's basic. When the players don't play well, that's when the flaws really get exposed. And yesterday, there's a lot of individual players on this defense that just did not play well, particularly the guys that you think are going to be the stars. Kenny Clark, I thought, had a really good first half. Didn't seem to have as much impact in the second half. Now, I don't know if he was just getting worn down by the fact the Packers were out there for 83 plays. And that's a lot of plays for the defense to be out there in a game. And normally you're looking 60, 65, maybe just under 70 plays tops for a defense. And they're out there actually more than 83 plays, I think. And that's just a ton of snaps for the defense to be out there. And that becomes sort of the chicken or the egg thing. Defense can't get off the field, but offense isn't playing complementary football with 3 and outs. So nobody's helping each other in those situations. And yeah, you said it. We came in. I'm sorry, but Ritter is not a very good quarterback in this league. And give him credit, as you said. He made some plays down the stretch, but he looked pretty awful for 3 quarters. I mean, he looked bad. He looked like he was one of the probably 5 to 7 worst starting quarterbacks in the league for 3 quarters. And the defense just kept bending. And unfortunately, they just didn't have an answer for Bijan Robinson. And so the Falcons were able to get within that one score. And that's just changes the game because, Ritter made some throws to London, as you pointed out, against Jair. But the defense gave him the opportunity to do that by not slowing down the run game. All of their third downs, it seemed like, were 3rd and 1 to 3rd and 4 at maximum. So you give offenses short down and distance situations on 3rd or 4th down, and that's going to be tougher sledding for the day. That gives them their full playbook, and their best player is the running back. You mentioned Madden, that Joe Barry's doing stuff on Madden. Honestly, I felt like Arthur Smith was doing stuff on Madden. He was just isolating Bijan Robinson, hot route running, and it was just crazy. I don't understand how he could get so open. Everybody's looking at that play, key play down the stretch with Devontae Campbell lined up against him on 10 yards off the ball. I'm stumbling a little bit here just thinking of that moment, but I mean, there was a pass out of the flat earlier in the second half, and nobody was within 10 yards of him. And it's like, he's the one guy. How that's just unacceptable. Part of me says, well, Joe Barry doesn't give the guys the communication that says don't cover the best player. So that might be more on the players than it was on Joe Barry and on that particular one. But at the same time, it's just, we keep seeing this over and over and over in the 3 years in his tenure. And it's just frustrating that we don't seem to have as you said, the right game plan against mediocre to below average offensive football teams. And they can just come out here and run the ball like this on us. And so new year, same story on the defensive side. I will say though, Dane, do you expect that the defense will respond in terms of not missing so many darn tackles like they did this week? Because that was just, to me, that added salt to the wounds as far as I was concerned.
Oh, it was brutal, and I hope so next week. But that we're playing the Saints next week, and I know Jamal Williams is going to want to beat the Packers. He liked beating them last year in Detroit, so he's a bowling ball out there. So I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated right now with this defense across the board. Wags, question for you. I mean, as much as there was a lot of stuff, I mean, I thought the play of the game in a negative way for this Packers team was the Darnell Savage miss. What happened there, man? Because it looked like Savage had a chance at the minimum to just knock the ball away, at a maximum to intercept, and somehow Hollins comes down with that football. But I thought that completely changed the entire game. If that ball either ends up in Savage's hands or is just an incomplete pass, I think the Packers get out of this game. I really do. So what goes down there? How does Savage miscalculate that ball? And I ask because, like, this isn't the first time in Savage's career we've seen this kind of miscalculation where it looks like he's going to come down with a football and the other offensive player comes down with it instead.
Yeah, you just jumped too soon. I watched that play. What else can you say? But what you did it was a miscalculation. He just didn't play the ball. I don't know if in that moment he thought he was going to get his hands on it and get the interception. Honestly, though, like, you just have to have the awareness. If you don't have full body control and in front of that football, and he was coming from an angle, just knock the ball, pass breakup. Don't try to be a hero. Just make the fundamentally sound play. And for better or worse, Darnell Savage has been someone that likes to take risks and gamble to try to make the hero play at times over his career. He played really well in week 1. You called it out. And deservedly so. He got kudos for maybe a little bit of a surprise performance. This week we saw a lot of what caused him to get benched last year, not only on that play but in his run support. He was just a matador. I mean, he was just flying up trying to make a play, but just no ability to break down, was just missing tackles right and left. And it's, that's not how you make a play. If you're just flailing at someone trying to be a heat-seeking missile and throw your body at someone's feet, especially someone as good as Bijan Robinson, it's not going to be that hard for him to duke you, which we saw again and again and again. So Darnell Savage wasn't the only one that was missing on Robinson, but I think he was one that was glaring on a number of plays. That last series, they go for it on 4th down, which is a little bit surprised by. They could have just kicked the field goal and taken the lead. They were able to milk the clock a little bit more. That was a play that not only Savage, but I believe Devontae Campbell missed a tackle. And it's frustrating when these guys are maybe not schemed to be in the strongest position, but then they're just compounding it by not being fundamental and sound in how they're attacking the lanes and wrapping up and doing the most basic things that you learn how to do in 5th and 6th and 7th grade football. And so yeah, the Falcons are talented. Give them credit. But you said at the top, I think the biggest thing that was frustrating with this defense is, quite frankly, I just felt like we had a big mismatch advantage along the front. And unfortunately, that didn't manifest itself, particularly in the second half.
From a positive perspective on the defensive side of the ball, did anybody stick out to you? Quay Walker stuck out to me as somebody who I thought played a really nice football game for the Packers. Second week in a row for him that he stood out, seemed to be the best player, I thought, on the defense from my perspective. He outsnapped Campbell pretty significantly too. So he's somebody that I thought played all 4 quarters. And, was super physical, was trying to shed blocks. Unfortunately for him, a lot of times he had guys on him and he was trying to shed blocks to make a tackle, but he was super active. I thought, not afraid to obviously get in there and stick his nose in some business. But did anybody, did he stick out to anybody else stick out to you, Wags, on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I think Rasul Douglas has been playing well through 2 weeks, and I thought he had a solid game yesterday as well. Certainly, it's hard to have anyone really stand out. Obviously, Quay Walker is another guy that would like to have another opportunity to come down with what could have been his second straight week with an interception, and it looked like he had a lot of green in front of him in this one as well. So, that said, interestingly, I believe the Packers offense scored in the next series, so they picked him up. So depending on how you want to look at it, it didn't technically cost the Packers any points, as they were able to take the ball and go down and score in the next possession. But certainly would have been nice to have Quay Walker coming down. But it's I thought Rudy Ford had a little bit of a bounce back from week 1. Wasn't his strongest performance in the first game, but was pretty sound overall yesterday, and a tough overall defensive performance. And Kenny Clark, as I mentioned earlier in the first half, I thought was really disruptive, especially in some of those situations and passing situations, and was really getting a lot of movement up the middle. So that was nice to see. Overall, this front just needs to really, really, I think, respond. And I wonder too, you talk about Joe Barry as kind of the lightning rod of the defense, but what about some of his defensive coaching staff? I mean, Jerry Montgomery has been in charge of this defensive line, and I think he had a lot of excuses in past years with maybe not that much talent on this defensive front. I don't think he has that excuse this year, does he, Dane? So it's not just on the coordinator, but it's some of these position group coaches need to make sure they're coaching their guys up and are ready and to go out there and perform at a high level, motivate them to perform at a high level. So perhaps we need to put some scrutiny on some of those guys as well, because it just, as you said, it didn't seem like the defensive line was soaking up blocks at a minimum, which is what their first job is. But they also just seem to really disappear in terms of applying any pressure or getting any upfield pressure in the second half as they were in the first half. So those would be the other guys I think worth mentioning on the defensive side. And look, hopefully, your star players are going to respond. I think Devondre Campbell didn't have the best year last year, but I still think he's a really solid inside linebacker. Jair, I know you've not been a huge fan of kind of how his approach, but he's clearly a really premium player, but he's got to deliver. He's got to bounce back and step up. So in the past, I think he has. It just needs to be controlled, and it's got to be consistent. And I think that's the frustrating thing that we haven't necessarily seen from some of the individual star players on the defense as well. Rashawn Gary, I know he got beat pretty badly on that 4th down that Ritter scored. I'll give him a little bit of a pass. I think I'm going to reserve judgment on Gary until he's back to full health and playing more snaps out there. He didn't have quite the impact, though, that I was hoping he would this week. So it wasn't his best performance either. So, I think you've got to certainly have your best players out there performing at a high level to cover up when perhaps we don't have the best scheme week to week from the coaching staff. So, Dane, any other thoughts as we close up on this defense?
Nothing else on defense. I'm just thinking I was happy Anders Carlson hit some field goals again. Nice to see him settling in here.
Would have liked to see him attempt another one in the first quarter. We didn't mention that either, and that's another Coach LaFleur blunder. And frankly, Coach Bisaccia, the whole coaching staff, they've got to be on top of that. And that's just not acceptable that we have those mistakes too. So, but that being said, it's done now. I don't think the Falcons can say the same thing. Yeah, the Packers lost by 1. It would have been nice in a 1-point loss to not have potential points come off the board, but you can play that game. Falcons probably had 13 to 17 points that they took off the board in the first half. So it's easy to play that if cans or buts, but he was accurate. So that's nice to see. And the snaps have not been necessarily super on point so far this year. I noticed another one that was a little wayward that Waylon had to handle yesterday as well. So something to be watching as we move forward. Hopefully nothing that impacts the ability to get the whole kick off in time and accurately in time as well.
Yeah, and you're spot on. Waylon had to pull another one down, and week 1 we saw him have to do that too. So you're right. It's kind of 2 for 2 here, unfortunately, through a couple of weeks. And then I'll just say, Innis Gaines had another really nice tackle on coverage. We put it out on social. We said, get this man on the 53. He's been elevated 2 weeks in a row. He's a gunner. He gets down the field and he makes plays. So, he always seems to get his nose in there on special teams. So just another guy. You got to give props to those gunners, man. If they're getting their nose in there and making plays, that's not an easy job. So shout out to him.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see what they do. If they're just trying to use some of the pickups that they had after they cut down to 53 to have a quote expanded roster. But you only have so many call-ups for Innis Gaines and Patrick Taylor. So once they run out of those options, it's going to be interesting how they manipulate their roster and how they move forward there. So, Dane, I think that pretty much covers everything on both sides of the ball. So real quickly, we highlighted some positive players, but why don't we at least do our game balls of the week and hand out our Leap Spirits, the legendary Big Cheese players of the week. That was a mouthful. Sorry. I'm going to let you go first. Why don't we start on the offensive side of the ball? Curious to see who you've got nominated for our Leap Spirits Big Cheese player of the week on the offensive side.
Yeah, I tend to want to go Jordan, but I'm going to go with Jaden Reed. 2 touchdowns, looks so explosive, became the weapon, stepped up with Watson down again, with a lot of big time players down. I hard to not give Jaden Reed, and it's only his second career NFL game, the love as our Leap Spirits player of week 2.
I will gladly second that, Dane. I'm sure you're not going to be surprised by that. So, all right. So that's official. I think Jordan gets a solid shout out, honorable mention as he continues to, for the most part, do what we would have expected, as much or more than what we expected, I think, through his first 2 NFL starts. So on the defensive side of the ball, Dane, I'm just going to go ahead and second your mention a couple minutes ago of Quay Walker as a defensive player of the week this week. Certainly, as I just said, you'd like to see him grab that interception. It hits him right in the hands. So that's a big potential play that could have gone the other way. But I think he was honestly put in some difficult situations, having to man the entire second level of the defense. And he was covering a lot of ground out there. So not the best day for this defense, I think, to put it lightly overall. But I certainly would agree with you that Quay Walker was not one of the ones that was responsible for a majority of the problems that we're having. So I'm happy to nominate him as the Big Cheese Defensive Player of the Week this week.
Love it. I'm second that. Obviously, he's the guy for sure this week. A really strong start for Quay Walker, year 2. Very excited to see him continue to grow in this defense.
Yep, absolutely. So, Dane, I think that just about does it for us for this episode, folks. Stay tuned. Come back. Join us Thursday night. We'll be doing our preview of week 3. Packers are finally going to be home in Lambeau, take on the Saints this week. So I think this will be another really nice matchup. The Saints look like they're going to be a solid team. So this will be a good test for us back home. And I'll be anxious to get into talking about that matchup and what we can expect to see for week 3 and how these guys can go out there and respond after a loss. So, Dane, thanks as always, folks. Join us Thursday. Thanks for following along or listening. For those that you were on with us live tonight, be legendary and go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.
Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go Pack Go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will